Think getting canceled on Twitter is bad? Try being a woman in 1612 who sneezed wrong in front of her neighbor. That sneeze just bought you a date with red-hot iron tongs, a drowning tank, and an executioner who hasn't had his morning coffee yet. For 3 centuries, between 40,000 and 60,000 people, mostly women, were legally tortured and executed for the crime of supposedly flying on broomsticks and making deals with the devil. Except here's the thing that'll keep you up tonight. The accusations were usually about unpaid debts, property disputes, or just being too old and annoying. The real question isn't why this happened. It's how these punishments were so precisely designed to maximize suffering while keeping the victim alive long enough to confess to crimes that were physically impossible. Before we descend into this nightmare, do something for me. If you believe history isn't just dates and dead kings, but the raw, unfiltered, blood-soaked truth of what humans are capable of when fear meets power, smash that like button. Subscribe because we're not just reciting textbook facts. We're uncovering the documented horrors they glossed over in school. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's descend into the machinery of accusation, torture, and execution that turns suspicion into a death sentence. The swimming test where innocence equals drowning. Let's start with the most insane catch-22 in legal history, the water ordeal, also known as swimming the witch. Picture this. It's 1645 in Essex, England, and you're a 62-year-old widow named Elizabeth Clark. Your neighbors think you cursed their cow because it stopped giving milk after you walked past it. Completely logical, right? So, Matthew Hopkins, the self-proclaimed witch-finder general, has you stripped naked, your thumbs tied to your opposite toes, and thrown into a pond. The theory? Water, being pure and used in baptism, would reject a witch. If you float, you're guilty and will be hanged. If you sink and drown, congratulations, you're innocent, just dead. Imagine being tied up so you can't swim properly, exhausted from 3 nights of forced sleeplessness, and tossed into freezing water while a crowd watches like it's a medieval Netflix special. Elizabeth Clark floated. Of course she floated. Everyone floats when they can't control their limbs and their lungs are full of air from panic. She was pulled out, declared guilty, and executed. At least 19 women in Hopkins's campaign alone went through this twisted logic experiment. The English swimming test was basically medieval trial by Yelp review. Your neighbor thinks you gave them a weird look? Into the pond you go. The psychological torture began before the water even touched your skin. You'd be marched through town, often naked or in just a shift, while crowds jeered and threw things. The humiliation was the point. By the time you hit the water, you'd already been convicted in the court of public opinion. Here's where it gets darker. The testers weren't idiots. They knew what they were doing. They'd tie you in specific ways to ensure floating. Sometimes they'd attach wooden blocks or use ropes with just enough slack to keep you bobbing at the surface. It was rigged from the start, a theatrical performance disguised as divine judgment. And if somehow you actually sank, they'd usually wait just long enough to prove your innocence before pulling you up. Sometimes, other times, they'd be too busy arguing about the theological implications to notice you'd stopped moving. The instruments of confession, torture as legal procedure. But the water test was just the audition. The real horror show happened in the interrogation chambers, where torture wasn't some secret abuse. It was legal policy, documented in official manuals with illustrated diagrams. The Malleus Maleficarum, published in 1487, was basically the IKEA instruction manual for witch hunting, complete with step-by-step torture techniques. Over 30,000 copies were printed. Let that sink in. 30,000 how-to guides for extracting confessions through agony. Let's talk about the thumb screws, which sounds almost quaint until you understand the mechanics. These weren't just tight clamps. They were precision instruments with serrated edges that crushed bone and fingernails simultaneously. Interrogators would tighten them slowly, one turn every few minutes, asking the same questions over and over. Do you consort with demons? Do you fly to Sabbaths? Who are your accomplices? The crushing was designed to cause maximum nerve damage without killing you, because a dead woman can't name other witches, and they always wanted names. Then we have the strappado, which was medieval Europe's answer to the question, how do we dislocate every joint in someone's arms? You'd be hoisted by a rope tied to your wrists behind your back, dangling above the ground. Just hanging there would dislocate your shoulders within minutes. The human arm isn't designed to support full body weight in that position. But they didn't stop there. They'd drop you suddenly, stopping just before you hit the ground, then hoist you back up. Each drop would tear ligaments, rip muscles, and send lightning bolts of pain through your entire body. Some interrogators added weights to your feet because apparently gravity wasn't working fast enough. In Bamberg, Germany, in 1627, a woman named Anna Hansen endured the strappado 6 times in one session. 6. The court records, still preserved in German archives, note that she confessed nothing during the first application. The casual bureaucracy of that statement is chilling. They documented torture like accountants tracking expenses. After the 6th time, with both arms permanently damaged, Anna confessed to flying to a witch's sabbath on a pitchfork. The interrogator wrote down every impossible detail she provided, details that matched exactly what he'd suggested during the torture. Funny how that works. The leg vices were another crowd favorite among interrogators. These devices slowly crushed your shins between 2 iron plates, often embedded with spikes. The pain was so intense that many women would pass out, at which point they'd be revived with cold water and the process would continue. Some devices were designed to shatter bones audibly, so the sound of your own skeleton breaking would encourage cooperation. The medieval version of playing yourself out with your own soundtrack. The pear and the chair, creative cruelty as public spectacle. Now we enter the territory of inventions that make you wonder what kind of person wakes up and thinks, you know what? Basic torture isn't creative enough. Enter the pear of anguish. A metal device shaped like a pear that would be inserted into the mouth, rectum, or female anatomy, then slowly expanded using a screw mechanism. The internal tearing was agonizing, but the real genius of this device was its public humiliation factor. Different pears had different engravings. Liars got pears with tongues engraved on them. Women accused of witchcraft got pears with demonic symbols. The Judas cradle takes the concept of sit down and shut up to a level that should come with a content warning. Imagine a pyramid-shaped seat, pointed end up. You'd be slowly lowered onto the point, which would penetrate but not kill you. Not immediately, anyway. The torturer controlled the descent with ropes, sometimes leaving you suspended just above the point for hours, sometimes lowering you inch by agonizing inch over days. Your own body weight became the instrument of torture. In some German territories, this device was called the Wake of the Witch, because victims couldn't sleep. The moment you relaxed, you'd sink further onto the pyramid. The witch's chair sounds almost civilized, until you learn it was a throne covered in 1,500 to 2,000 spikes. You'd be strapped to it naked while interrogators asked questions. Every movement, every breath, every muscle spasm would drive the spikes deeper. But here's the truly diabolical part. They'd often place a brazier of hot coals underneath the chair. As the metal heated up, you'd instinctively try to lift yourself off the surface, pushing deeper onto the spikes on the backrest and armrests. It was a choose-your-own adventure of agony, and every choice led to more pain. In the Würzburg trials of 1629, the bishop's torturer, a man named Hans Schmidt, who was paid per confession, used a spiked chair on 23 women in a single month. We know this because he submitted an itemized bill to the church. Line items included spiked chair sessions 23, spike replacement and maintenance 14 ducats, coal for heating 6 ducats. The banality of this evil is stunning. He treated torture the way we treat oil changes, just routine maintenance on the machinery of justice, burning alive the grand finale. But all these tortures were just the opening act. The execution, specifically burning at the stake, was the main event that entire towns would turn out to watch. This wasn't a quick death. This was a carefully orchestrated public spectacle designed to take anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours, depending on how merciful the executioner felt and how much money your family could slip him. Here's how it actually worked. You'd be tied to a stake with chains, not ropes, because ropes burn through too quickly. Then they'd pile green wood around you, not dry wood. Dry wood burns hot and fast, killing you relatively quickly through smoke inhalation. Green wood smolders and produces thick smoke, but not enough heat to kill you immediately. You die slowly of burns and smoke inhalation, conscious for most of it, while the crowd watched and vendors sold food. Medieval tailgate party, except you're the entertainment. In Bamberg, in 1630, a woman named Anna Gutbrot was burned alive after confessing under torture to causing crop failures. The execution record notes that she prayed loudly for 23 minutes before the smoke overcame her. 23 minutes. The executioner's log, preserved in the Bamberg archives, includes a note that he was paid extra because the wind changed direction thrice, requiring relighting. They had to restart her execution 3 times because the wind kept blowing out the flames. Sometimes, if you were lucky, or if your family bribed the executioner, you'd be strangled or beheaded before the fire was lit. In Scotland, this mercy was called wearying at the stake, but the bribe had to be substantial. Joan of Arc was denied this mercy despite multiple requests. She was 19 years old when she burned in Rouen in 1431. The executioner positioned her stake particularly high, so the flames wouldn't reach her quickly. and he later told a monk he believed he was damned for what he'd done. That executioner had burned dozens of people, but something about Joan's execution haunted him. The aftermath was equally grotesque. Executioners would rake through the ashes looking for intact bones, which had to be pulverized and scattered, or thrown into rivers. The belief was that witches could reconstitute themselves from their remains, so even in death, your bones couldn't rest. In some German territories, executioners sold witch ash as a folk remedy for various ailments. The irony of using witches' remains as medicine, while killing them for supposedly using magic to harm people, apparently escaped everyone. The machinery of accusation. Why this happened to women. Here's the part that transforms this from historical horror show into something darker. The pattern of who got accused and why. About 75 to 80% of witch trial victims were women, and they weren't random women. They were widows with property, women who refused marriage proposals from powerful men, healers who competed with male physicians, women who spoke too loudly in church, women who were too sexually active or not sexually active enough. In Essex, in 1645, a woman named Rebecca West was accused because she'd inherited her husband's substantial estate and refused to sell it cheaply to a local magistrate. Within 3 months, she was hanging from a gallows. In Geneva in 1545, 31 women were burned in 3 months. Their crime pattern? Most were older widows whose property reverted to the city upon their execution. The witch trials were, in many cases, a legal framework for theft, sexual violence, and the elimination of inconvenient women, all wrapped in the language of holy righteousness. The Bamberg witch trials between 1626 and 1631 killed at least 300 people, mostly women. The Prince Bishop Gottfried Johann Georg II Fuchs von Dornheim built a dedicated witch prison called the Drudenhaus, the Witch House, with custom torture chambers. He wasn't some crazed fanatic. He was a sophisticated political operator who used witch trials to consolidate power and seize property. When accusations started targeting wealthy families and even reached his own relatives, the trials suddenly stopped. Funny how the devil stopped operating in Bamberg, right when rich men's daughters started getting accused. So we started with a woman thrown into a pond, and we've ended with hundreds of thousands of women tortured and executed across 3 centuries. The machinery of witch trials wasn't about catching actual witches. It was about control. Control of women's bodies, women's property, women's voices. Every time you complained too loudly, inherited too much money, healed too effectively, or just looked at someone wrong, you could end up tied to a stake. Next time you think getting unfollowed on social media is persecution, remember Anna Hansen's dislocated arms? Remember Elizabeth Clark drowning to prove her innocence? Remember Joan of Arc praying while burning alive? These women weren't witches. They were healers, widows, independent women, and sometimes just people who lived next door to someone who wanted their land. Which of these punishments shocked you most? The drowning test's impossible logic? The bureaucratic precision of torture? The burning spectacle? Drop it in the comments below. If this made you grateful you can own property, speak in public, and sneeze without fearing execution, subscribe for more historical nightmares that'll make your worst Monday look like paradise. I'll see you in the next one, where we'll explore medieval medical procedures that make these tortures look merciful. Until then, maybe appreciate that you live in a time when weird looks don't equal death sentences.